One night, a shy teenage girl walked onto one of the biggest stages in the world and shocked millions with a voice that sounded decades older than her years. Overnight, she became a symbol of raw talent and fearless performance. But behind that sudden fame was a young mind still learning how to handle attention, pressure, and expectation. As applause grew louder, her private world became quieter. Decisions were made quickly, paths were chosen early, and the space to grow slowly began to disappear. What truly happens when a child's life changes before they fully understand what that change means? Because what unfolded next would quietly shape everything that followed. Before the bright lights and loud applause, Courtney Hadwin lived a quiet life shaped by routine, family closeness, and gentle moments of reflection. She grew up in a small English town where days moved slowly and familiar faces filled everyday spaces. Life there did not rush. It flowed. School mornings, simple meals, short walks, and calm evenings formed a steady rhythm that helped her feel safe. In this environment, Courtney developed a thoughtful and reserved personality. She listened more than she spoke, often watching the world from a quiet distance. Social situations could feel overwhelming, not because of fear but because of sensitivity. She noticed details others missed. Changes in tone, small shifts in mood, unspoken feelings in a room. These impressions stayed with her, sometimes making it hard to speak when too many thoughts gathered at once. While classmates moved easily through conversations, she preferred silence, comforted by observation rather than participation. At home, however, another side of her began to emerge. Music became her language. When words failed, singing took their place. Alone in her room or surrounded by family, her voice filled the space with emotion. It carried joy, nervousness, hope, and longing. Singing allowed her to release feelings she did not yet know how to explain. Each note became a bridge between her inner world and the world outside. Her family noticed the change. When she sang, her posture straightened, her breathing slowed, her eyes focused. The gentle, shy child became grounded and confident, even if only for a few moments. They understood that music was more than a hobby. It was a tool for emotional balance. They encouraged her quietly, careful not to overwhelm her with expectations or pressure. As Courtney grew older, her voice matured quickly. It deepened, gaining texture and power uncommon for someone so young. The contrast between her soft personality and her bold voice became striking. On stage, she appeared fearless. Off stage, she remained thoughtful and reserved. This duality shaped her identity. She learned to move between two emotional spaces, one public and one private, long before she fully understood why. Small performances began to appear. Local shows, community events, and talent contests offered chances to share her voice beyond the walls of home. Each performance brought excitement, but also uncertainty. Before stepping on stage, nervous energy filled her chest. She wondered how people would respond. Applause felt surprising. Compliments felt unreal. Yet once she began singing, fear softened into focus, and her voice once again guided her forward. Her family protected her emotional world carefully. They limited exposure, guarded her routines, and ensured she still experienced childhood in simple ways. They understood that growing up too quickly could steal something precious. Their goal was not rapid success, but emotional stability. Still, opportunity has a way of expanding. Invitations slowly grew larger. Audiences increased. With each step, questions followed. Could emotional sensitivity survive public attention? Would larger platforms bring confidence or deepen self-doubt? These thoughts lingered quietly, unspoken, as her journey continued. Even before national attention entered the picture, subtle changes had already begun. Her world was widening. The comfort of anonymity was shrinking. And though she remained grounded, the emotional foundation of her life was preparing to face a far more demanding reality. Somewhere between childhood and ambition, a shift was beginning. A path was forming, shaped by talent, support, and unspoken expectation. And with it came an uncertain emotional future that no amount of preparation could fully predict. When the opportunity to audition for America's Got Talent arrived, it did not feel like a sudden victory. Instead, it brought a quiet pause. For Courtney, the idea of standing on one of the world's biggest stages carried excitement, but also deep uncertainty. This was not a local audience. This was a global one. Millions of eyes. Endless opinions. A moment that could reshape everything. Preparation became more than just practice. Rehearsals were filled with emotional effort as much as technical focus. Every song choice, every note, every breath carried weight. She worked to steady her nerves, to remain calm, to trust her voice. Her family stayed close, offering reassurance without pressure. Their presence reminded her that no outcome would change who she was to them. Still, doubt lingered. Could she handle the intensity? Would the stage overwhelm her? Would fear take control? These questions followed her into the waiting room, where long hours passed in silence. Surrounded by strangers, each carrying their own hopes, Courtney felt the emotional weight of the moment settle in her chest. Time slowed. Thoughts became louder. Standing backstage, she felt small. The scale of the production, the bright lights, the distant noise of the crowd all combined into a blur of sensation. In that moment, her quiet nature surfaced strongly. She focused inward, breathing slowly, holding onto the familiar comfort of music. Then came the walk onto the stage. Each step felt heavy, yet steady. The lights shone brightly. The audience faded into shadow. The judges waited. And for a brief second, uncertainty hovered in the silence. But once she began to sing, something shifted. Her voice rose with strength and clarity, carrying emotion far beyond her years. Fear loosened its grip. Focus replaced doubt. The shy girl disappeared, replaced by a performer fully present in the moment. Her sound filled the room, commanding attention without force. Each lyric reflected vulnerability, resilience, and emotional depth. The reaction was immediate. Surprise moved across the judges' faces. The audience responded with awe. Applause built, filling the space with energy. In just minutes, a life shaped by quiet routine transformed into one defined by public recognition. Yet as powerful as that moment was, its emotional impact did not settle gently. Praise arrived quickly and in overwhelming volume. Social media surged. Messages poured in. Headlines followed. The pace of life accelerated before she had time to understand what had changed. Behind the scenes, reality began shifting. Schedules tightened. Travel became frequent. Privacy narrowed. Simple routines disappeared. Normal teenage experiences faded into the background as performance demands took center stage. For Courtney, gratitude mixed with emotional confusion. She felt thankful for opportunity, but uncertain about the cost. Recognition brought joy, but also vulnerability. Her voice had opened doors, yet it had also placed her under constant observation. Family support remained strong, but even their steady presence could not fully slow the momentum. Life now moved according to production timelines rather than personal rhythm. Decisions were made quickly. Adjustments happened fast. The audition marked a dividing point. Before, music was personal expression. After, it became expectation. What had once been private release turned into public responsibility. And with that shift came emotional complexity that would continue unfolding long after the stage lights dimmed. Success had arrived, but its meaning was no longer simple. It carried weight. And beneath the applause, a new emotional journey had begun, one that would test balance, resilience, and identity in ways she had never faced before. As the competition continued, Courtney's world grew louder, faster, and more demanding. Each performance carried higher expectations than the last. The audience no longer waited simply to be surprised. They expected impact. They expected power. They expected emotion. With every appearance, the standard rose, and the emotional space to simply exist grew smaller. Days became filled with rehearsals, recordings, interviews, and long hours of waiting. Quiet moments were rare. Reflection time disappeared. Her life began to follow production schedules rather than personal rhythms. Meals, sleep, and rest all adjusted to the pace of filming. Though surrounded by people, emotional solitude slowly settled in. Public attention intensified. Social media turned her performances into constant conversation. Praise arrived quickly, but so did pressure. Comparisons formed. Predictions circulated. Opinions multiplied. Learning to separate her sense of worth from public reaction became an emotional challenge. She was praised for strength, yet rarely allowed to show vulnerability. Distance from home deepened the emotional strain. Familiar surroundings were replaced by studios and hotels. Family conversations became shorter, carried through screens and brief visits. Comfort turned into memory. Routine turned into exception. Though success surrounded her, a quiet longing for simplicity grew stronger. Emotionally, the experience became layered. Gratitude existed alongside fatigue. Pride blended with uncertainty. The joy of singing remained, but the emotional release it once offered now competed with performance pressure. On stage, she gave everything. Off stage, she often felt emptied. Yet within this intensity, resilience began to form. Courtney learned to hold herself steady under constant observation. She learned to regulate fear, manage exhaustion, and maintain composure. These skills developed quickly, shaped by necessity rather than choice. Emotional independence grew faster than her years. Each performance became an exercise in emotional control. She focused on breathing, grounding, and presence. Even when nerves surged, she anchored herself through music. Her voice remained her guide, steady amid chaos. The stage, once intimidating, became a place of familiarity, even comfort, though it demanded emotional endurance. Behind the applause, pressure continued building. Expectations were no longer external. They became internal. She wanted to meet standards, to honor opportunity, to avoid disappointment. This internal drive fueled effort, but also deepened fatigue. The line between motivation and emotional strain blurred. By the later stages of the competition, success no longer felt light. It carried responsibility. Each decision, each note, each public appearance mattered. The emotional stakes grew heavier. Yet she moved forward, supported by family, guided by discipline, and sustained by resilience. Still, a quiet question lingered beneath the surface. How long could this pace continue? How much emotional strength could be drawn before exhaustion took hold? These thoughts surfaced only in brief moments of solitude, quickly pushed aside by the next rehearsal, the next interview, the next performance. In the midst of acclaim, Courtney began learning one of the hardest lessons of early success, that visibility does not always bring emotional security. Sometimes, it brings deeper vulnerability. And as her journey advanced, the balance between strength and strain became increasingly delicate, shaping the next stage of her personal and emotional evolution. When the competition finally ended, life did not immediately return to normal. Instead, silence arrived. The constant movement, noise, and attention faded, leaving behind a stillness that felt unfamiliar. For the first time in months, Courtney had space to slow down. Yet in that quiet, emotions that had been set aside began to surface. Returning home brought comfort, but also reflection. Familiar rooms, family routines, and simple moments reminded her of who she had been before the spotlight. Small details took on new meaning. Morning light through the window. Quiet meals together. Walks without schedules. These ordinary experiences slowly restored a sense of grounding. Emotionally, she began to process the journey. The pace of fame had demanded constant strength, leaving little room to feel uncertainty or exhaustion. Now, those feelings gently emerged. Fatigue, confusion, and emotional release arrived in waves. Rest became necessary, not optional. Healing required patience. Family support remained central. Their presence provided emotional safety. Conversations deepened. They spoke about experiences, fears, and hopes. This openness allowed understanding to replace tension. It created space for vulnerability, something that had been difficult during the intensity of competition. Music slowly returned to its original role. Without cameras and crowds, singing once again became private expression rather than performance. In these quiet moments, her voice softened. Emotion flowed freely. Pressure eased. Creativity reawakened. Music regained its place as comfort rather than obligation. Yet the experience had changed her. Public recognition had shaped awareness. She understood now how quickly attention could rise and fall. Expectations lingered, even in silence. Learning to separate identity from public image became an ongoing process. She worked to remember that her worth existed beyond applause. Social media continued to remind her of public presence. Messages arrived daily. While supportive, they reinforced visibility. She learned to manage boundaries, choosing when to engage and when to step back. Emotional balance required intentional space. Gradually, Courtney rebuilt routines that honored both growth and rest. Education, creative exploration, and family connection became priorities. These elements formed a foundation for stability. Progress slowed, but depth increased. Through this period of adjustment, self-awareness deepened. She recognized emotional limits and respected them. Strength became defined not by endurance alone, but by self-care. This shift allowed healing to unfold naturally. Yet uncertainty remained. The world still expected performance. Opportunities continued to appear. Each invitation carried both excitement and emotional consideration. Decisions now required reflection rather than impulse. The journey forward no longer felt rushed. It became intentional. And in this slower rhythm, Courtney began rediscovering her voice, not just as a performer, but as a person. A delicate balance formed between ambition and well-being. Still, one question lingered quietly beneath her calm. Could emotional peace truly coexist with the memory of such intense public exposure? And as she prepared for the next stage of life, the answer remained gently unresolved. With time and distance from the intense spotlight, Courtney began to rethink what success truly meant. The applause and recognition that once felt overwhelming slowly settled into perspective. Instead of chasing attention, she started listening more closely to her own emotional needs. The journey had taught her that growth did not always require speed. Sometimes it required stillness. This shift changed how she approached music. Rather than feeling pushed to constantly perform, she allowed creativity to return naturally. Song choices became personal rather than strategic. Performances became moments of connection rather than expectation. Each creative decision reflected emotional readiness instead of public demand. She began choosing opportunities carefully, guided by comfort rather than pressure. This intentional pace restored confidence. It allowed her to rebuild trust in her instincts. The fear of falling behind faded as self-awareness grew. Public interaction evolved as well. Instead of presenting a polished image, she embraced honesty. Sharing vulnerability created deeper connections. Fans responded not only to talent, but to sincerity. This exchange strengthened emotional balance, allowing her to engage without feeling consumed. Family influence remained steady. Their presence offered grounding perspective. Conversations often centered on well-being rather than achievement. This support system helped her maintain clarity as new possibilities emerged. Together, they evaluated choices through emotional impact rather than visibility. Education and personal growth gained renewed importance. Learning became a tool for stability, offering structure beyond performance. These experiences broadened identity, reminding her that music was part of life, not its entirety. Emotionally, maturity deepened. She learned to recognize early signs of exhaustion and respond with rest rather than endurance. Boundaries strengthened. Confidence became rooted in self-trust rather than validation. Through these shifts, emotional resilience grew steadily. This period reshaped her understanding of ambition. Success was no longer measured by stage size or audience reach. It became defined by peace, purpose, and creative fulfillment. Each step forward reflected intentional growth. Yet navigating public life continued to require careful balance. Attention still followed. Expectations still existed. Choosing when to engage and when to step back remained an ongoing process. Emotional clarity guided these decisions, but uncertainty occasionally surfaced. Despite this, Courtney moved forward with renewed calm. The lessons of early fame transformed into emotional wisdom. Music became expression again. Life regained rhythm. Identity strengthened beyond performance. As Courtney continued growing, the effects of early fame became more visible in the way she viewed the world. Experiences that usually unfold slowly during adolescence had arrived all at once. Responsibility replaced simplicity. Awareness replaced innocence. Her emotional understanding matured faster than her years, shaping how she approached relationships, success, and self-worth. While peers navigated ordinary routines, her life carried a different rhythm. Travel, performance schedules, and public expectations reshaped daily life. Moments of normal teenage exploration often occurred in limited spaces, guided by careful planning and supervision. This accelerated environment built discipline and emotional control, but it also carried subtle sacrifice. Friendships evolved differently. Maintaining close connections required effort across distance and time constraints. Conversations often happened through screens rather than shared spaces. Emotional closeness adapted to these conditions, creating bonds rooted in understanding rather than constant presence. Yet the absence of spontaneous moments was quietly felt. Emotionally, she developed independence early. Decision-making became a necessity rather than a choice. Understanding contracts, schedules, and public commitments introduced complexity far beyond childhood. Navigating these responsibilities built strength, but it also created emotional fatigue. The pressure to remain composed became an internal expectation. Despite these challenges, resilience remained her anchor. Each obstacle refined emotional awareness. She learned to regulate stress, identify boundaries, and prioritize well-being. These lessons arrived early, but they provided tools for long-term stability. Reflection became central to growth. Looking back, she recognized both the opportunities and the emotional costs. Gratitude existed alongside acceptance. She understood that early fame offered extraordinary experiences, yet it also reshaped development in lasting ways. Family support continued to provide grounding. Their presence reminded her that identity extended beyond public perception. Conversations centered on balance, perspective, and emotional health. This guidance helped her integrate past experiences into present understanding. Creative expression evolved alongside maturity. Music reflected deeper emotional layers. Lyrics carried nuance. Performance became storytelling rather than display. This transformation allowed healing through art, turning personal growth into creative depth. Yet the emotional impact of growing up quickly lingered. Questions about missed experiences surfaced quietly. Curiosity about alternate paths emerged. These reflections did not carry regret, but awareness. Understanding what had changed helped shape future choices. As she moved forward, Courtney embraced a more measured approach to life. Patience replaced urgency. Purpose replaced pressure. Emotional intelligence guided ambition. These qualities formed a foundation for sustainable growth. Still, one uncertainty remained. How would these early lessons shape her future resilience when new challenges appeared? The answer lay ahead, waiting to unfold through time, experience, and continued self-discovery. With experience came quiet strength. Courtney's journey had taught her that resilience does not always appear loud or bold. Often, it grows silently, shaped by reflection, patience, and steady emotional awareness. Over time, she began trusting her instincts more deeply, allowing inner guidance to shape her decisions. Public attention continued, but its influence softened. She no longer measured her worth through applause or online response. Instead, she focused on emotional alignment. Projects were chosen for meaning rather than exposure. Each creative step reflected authenticity, not urgency. This shift created space for calm. Anxiety that once accompanied performance gradually eased. Singing became expression again rather than obligation. In these moments, her voice carried emotional honesty, resonating more deeply with both herself and listeners. Relationships strengthened through intentional presence. Family remained central, offering stability and grounding. Conversations emphasized emotional well-being and long-term perspective. These exchanges reinforced trust and mutual understanding, building a support system rooted in compassion. Friendships deepened through shared growth. Emotional maturity allowed more open communication. Vulnerability replaced guardedness. This openness nurtured connection and emotional safety, fostering bonds based on empathy rather than circumstance. Creativity flourished within this emotional stability. Exploration replaced expectation. New musical styles, lyrical themes, and artistic directions emerged naturally. Each experiment reflected curiosity rather than pressure, enabling growth through discovery. Self-awareness guided personal boundaries. She learned to recognize when rest was needed and honor that need without guilt. Emotional energy became a resource to protect, not expend freely. This practice strengthened resilience and prevented burnout. Public engagement transformed as well. Interactions with audiences became thoughtful and genuine. Instead of presenting a flawless image, she shared moments of growth, challenge, and learning. This authenticity fostered deeper connection and mutual respect. Through these changes, Courtney reshaped her narrative. Her story no longer centered solely on early fame, but on emotional evolution, yet growth remained ongoing. Life continued presenting choices, opportunities, and challenges. The path ahead promised both excitement and uncertainty. But now, she moved forward equipped with emotional tools forged through experience. The strength she carried was no longer driven by external validation. It came from inner stability, from understanding her limits, from honoring her needs. This quiet resilience became her compass. Still, one question lingered gently beneath her calm. Would this inner strength continue protecting her as new stages unfolded? The answer would emerge gradually, shaped by time, self-trust, and the choices still waiting ahead. Looking forward, Courtney's journey reflects a redefined sense of success, one no longer measured by applause, recognition, or rapid achievement. Instead, it is defined by balance, emotional well-being, and the ability to make choices that align with her personal growth. Each step she takes is intentional, guided by experience, reflection, and a quiet understanding of her own needs. Music remains central, but it is no longer the sole measure of identity. Singing now serves as expression, connection, and emotional release. Performances are chosen not for visibility, but for meaning. Creativity flourishes within this framework, and her voice continues to carry honesty and depth. She has learned that the power of music lies not only in its impact on others, but in how it nourishes her own inner world. Her relationships also reflect this evolution. Family remains a cornerstone, offering grounding, perspective, and emotional support. Friendships and collaborations are chosen deliberately, built on mutual respect and understanding. Each connection becomes a source of calm rather than distraction, reinforcing a sense of stability. Courting opportunities now requires reflection rather than impulse. She weighs the emotional cost and personal benefit before committing. In this way, she preserves space for growth, rest, and self-discovery. Public attention is no longer a driving force. It is an external factor she navigates without losing herself. Emotionally, she has cultivated patience, resilience, and self-trust. The experiences of early fame, intense scrutiny, and accelerated growth have shaped wisdom that allows her to move forward with clarity. Challenges that might have once caused fear or confusion are now approached with calm awareness. She has learned that strength does not always announce itself. It often grows quietly, subtly, within the choices she makes every day. This perspective allows her to see success differently. It is not defined by charts, headlines, or social media metrics. Instead, it is measured by emotional stability, creative fulfillment, and the ability to live authentically. Growth is no longer rushed. It is deliberate and mindful. Looking at the path she has traveled, it becomes clear that the journey has been about more than fame or performance. It has been about understanding, resilience, and finding equilibrium between inner life and outer expectation. And yet, even with clarity and emotional stability, questions remain. Life will continue to present choices that require reflection, opportunities that demand discernment, and pressures that test balance. How will she navigate what lies ahead? Will the calm she has cultivated continue to guide her through the challenges yet to come? Because what happens when peace becomes the ultimate goal may quietly reshape everything that comes next. In this space of intentional living, Courtney continues to define her own measure of success, one built on resilience, authenticity, and the quiet strength that has carried her from childhood to the present.